What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. More than 4 years into this war, and few in Russia's pro-war world will openly admit that every additional town, industrial zone and line on the map may eventually be handed back anyway. Which means that the real question is no longer whether the Russian army can advance another 5 or 10 kilometers, but whether any of those advances can survive the political system that created them in the first place. Russian television obviously still presents each captured settlement as historic, yet many supporters now place their hopes in Donald Trump, European elections, political chaos in Kyiv, or some other unpredictable outside events, rather than in a breakthrough near Pokrovsk, the capture of Bakhmut, or decisive Russian offensive. A country basically is approaching a victory, kinda. A country like this does not need to wait for outsiders to rescue it or assume that Vladimir Putin's departure could reverse years of territorial gains described as sacred and permanent. That is why today I want to explain why modern conquest no longer pays, why Russia's pro-war community has stopped believing in a military solution, why Chasiv Yar, Bakhmut, Mariupol, Melitopol, Kherson, Avdiivka and Pokrovsk, besides hundreds of other small villages and settlements, may eventually disappear from Russia's official story, and why the final outcome could be a withdrawal welcomed by millions of Russians who simply just want their country back, who want their economy and future to become simply normal again. And if you guys want to see these videos in normal times, whenever it's convenient for you, not just at 6 AM, 5, 4 AM, please make sure to check our Patreon. There is also an additional chapter at the end of each episode, and your memberships are what keep the Russian dude going. The link to our Patreon is down below. Thanks so much. Now let's begin. Here is a perspective most people overlook, because for thousands of years wars could make a state richer, since more than 90% of the world's population lived as peasants. Agriculture formed the backbone of nearly every economy, productivity changed slowly, and wealth came mainly from controlling land together with the people working on it. Captured territory brought fields, harvests, taxes and workers, allowing one conquest to pretty much finance the next one, and then just never-ending loop. But the Industrial Revolution destroyed that logic, because modern wealth comes from functioning cities, educated workers, factories, global trade, and supply chains that can be damaged in days but require decades to rebuild. Modern weapons consume extraordinary money even before the infrastructure is damaged, because filling the roughly 300-gallon tank of a T-72 costs around $1,000. One howitzer round may cost $2,000. A guided projectile can reach $100,000. A cruise missile may cost $1 million. And firing a single Iskander can consume the equivalent of the annual revenue of a large meat-packing plant, while one day of tank battalion operations can equal the yearly revenue of a successful restaurant in a major city. Now multiply those numbers, which are already huge, across 4 years of vehicles, artillery, drones, missiles, fuel, salaries, and reconstruction. Because guess what? Captured land no longer arrives as a profitable trophy, no, it arrives as a financial obligation, destroyed, ruins, covered in, once again, destroyed roads, damaged housing, displaced residents, and an economy unable to support itself. Modern war spends fortunes damaging valuable assets, then spends even more revenue restoring power grids, housing, factories, roads, jobs, pretty much everything. The Russian-Ukrainian war goes beyond even this irrational pattern, because the most important territories may eventually be returned, meaning Russia could pay to capture them, hold them, rebuild them, and accept sanctions because of them, only to later surrender them because just during political reset, without receiving a lasting reward if any. Mariupol, once again, Melitopol, Bakhmut and other occupied areas obviously have value to Putin, but that value becomes irrelevant if a future Russian government decides that restoring trade, investment, technology and private property abroad matters way more than defending every line drawn under Putin. And once that possibility enters the public mind, the question is no longer what Russia captured today, but whether anyone will still pay for it tomorrow. Here is a big catch. The loudest voices insisting that Russia is winning are often the very same people whose hopes have been attached to somebody outside Russia, especially Donald Trump, who has treated almost like a supernatural deal maker, capable of just simply stepping off an airplane, forcing a ceasefire, and delivering the result that Russia's own campaign could never secure. Well, it never happened, as you can see. The contradiction itself is pretty obvious, because a state claiming to fight the entire Western world imagines an ending delivered by an American president winning an election thousands of kilometers away, persuading allies with different interests, and then using American pressure to create an outcome Russian forces could not produce on the ground. If this is not ironic, I don't know what else is. In just a second I will reveal what most people overlook, because nobody seriously argued that one more advance near Kupiansk would ever force negotiations, that another village would ever open the road to Kyiv, or that a new offensive would make Ukrainians surrender. While Trump, election scandals, or European division were repeatedly described as possible game changers. Well, this pattern appears whenever far-right parties such as AfD gain support in Germany, whenever Viktor Orbán challenges the European consensus, whenever a corruption scandal affects Zelensky's allies, or just simply whenever people imagine a coup in Kyiv installing a friendly government, somehow out of nowhere. Because each event is treated as more important than the military campaign, even though Russia cannot control American voters, German coalition politics, internal Ukrainian rivalries, or a crisis inside NATO. Well, some effectively admit that voters in a pivot country in Iowa, in pivot county, in Iowa matter more than Russian operations, exposing their belief that another 10 kilometers near Pokrovsk does not create the occupation of Ukraine, another flag over a damaged settlement does not bring Kyiv meaningfully closer, and another difficult battle does not solve the strategic problem Russia has faced from the very beginning. Now here's where things get tricky, because those celebrating tactical gains also fear a backdoor deal, where the gains barely matter. Well, simply because serious talks would not be organized around the emotional mythology of each battle. The Battle of Chasiv Yar has lasted roughly 4 times longer than the Battle of Stalingrad, while the 6-month Battle of Bakhmut produced more Russian-only losses than the 10-year Soviet-Afghan War. Yet, neither place opened the road to Kyiv, as you can see. Neither of those things collapsed the Ukrainian state, ended Western support, or created the decisive strategic shift promised by Russian commentators. Yulia Latinina, yes, she may praise Russia's strategic edge, but experienced pro-war influences understand tactical movement and strategic victory are very different things. And the easiest comparison is Burj Khalifa, this tallest building in the world. Since climbing its stairs to roughly 800 meters is extremely difficult, of course, but it does not, meaningfully increase your chances of, reaching the moon. It's hard, but still impossible. Advancing 10 kilometers can consume extraordinary resources without solving the larger challenge of controlling Ukraine, occupying Kyiv, and outlasting Western assistance, which is exactly why optimism rises when something happens in Washington, Budapest, or Kyiv, but rarely because of Bakhmut or Pokrovsk. And once the battlefield stops deciding victory, political succession becomes way more important than the entire territory. There is one more thing you all guys need to know, because the war's greatest limit may be the political lifespan of Vladimir Putin, since the campaign is tied so closely to his authority, fears, and decisions that many people inside Russia assume it cannot continue in the same form once he leaves the office. Pro-war authors complain that much of Russia's elite never supported the so-called special military operation, and say officials, business figures, and insiders would quickly exchange territorial claims for sanctions relief, foreign markets, their yachts, villas, banking access, and the chances to just simply rebuild their fortunes without permanent confrontation. And yes, in some way these people, they may be correct, not because every successor will be democratic or friendly towards Ukraine, by any means. No, but because a successor will face different incentives, since Putin must defend the war because admitting failure threatens the central story of his entire rule, while a new president could blame the disaster on the previous administration and present withdrawal as national rescue rather than humiliation. A successor could blame one man, and he definitely should. This person should reject even permanent isolation and say just a new leadership is restoring normal finally relations with Europe while protecting ordinary Russians from another generation of stagnation. And just we all have this big hope and fingers crossed it actually will happen. But here's where it gets really interesting, because territories captured after February 24, 2022 would be the easiest part of that reset to negotiate, while Crimea could unfortunately remain more complicated because of its longer incorporation, military importance, and deeper place in Russian identity. But places like Mariupol, Melitopol, Bakhmut, and surrounding areas could become bargaining pieces rather than permanent additions. They can be just given away immediately without any negotiations. Regardless of speeches and constitutional declarations, a successor could decide that maintaining control matters less than reopening borders, restoring exports, attracting investments, and giving Russian families confidence that their children will not enter another endless confrontation. After another 4 years at this pace, maps would show new villages, and media zones confirmed obituary could reach approximately 700,000 losses, but the distance between Russia and real military victory might remain nearly unchanged, because neither side appears capable of sustaining the strategic offensive needed to settle the entire war. Hostilities could even theoretically, and hopefully not, but well, theoretically last 50 years, but Putin cannot. And even a decade may be unrealistic for him, meaning that the political expiration date of the war could arrive within 5 years or hopefully less, well inside the validity period of an ordinary international passport, not because the battlefield becomes peaceful, but because the structure maintaining the campaign disappears. Now keep this in mind, because the pro-war community understands the danger, which is why its mood is increasingly dark and obsessed with betrayal, as its members fear not only that the war may end without victory, but that the public will greet its ending with relief. A successor would only need to argue that peace means easier travel, renewed investments, few restrictions, once again, just greater security in general, while continued occupation means continued isolation, enormous spending, and uncertainty. And the strongest evidence that Russians could accept this trait already exists in the withdrawal from Kherson, the major topic of our next chapter. Now this detail changes everything, because Kherson was declared part of Russia in 2022, complete with ceremonies and promises of permanence. Yet the retreat did not produce a national uprising, the government did not collapse, and millions of people simply continued with their lives. Kherson was a well-known regional capital, while places such as Avdiivka were far less familiar. Yet, even Kherson's loss created remarkably little resistance at the time when the war was still new and fresh in people's minds. Economic pressure was milder, and exhaustion had not just even reached base level, and well, yet, as you can see, nothing happened. The reaction showed that declarations and patriotic slogans do not create attachment when ordinary Russians have never visited even the territory, when they know literally nobody there, and experience the war mainly through rising costs, travel restrictions, mobilization fears, and huge uncertainty. Here's what some of you guys might not expect. Pretty much soldiers, families, propagandists, officials, and activists may discover that society's gratitude has limits, because once the political environment changes, personal sacrifices can be acknowledged briefly and then pushed aside during the rush towards normal life. A veteran injured for a territory later abandoned may protest, but the state can respond with a compensation, prosthetic, medal, managed ceremony, while the public accepts that policy has changed, particularly if the person received a recruitment payment of 3 million rubles, and the new government argues that continuing the war would only produce even more injured veterans. Once again, the never-ending cycle. The pointlessness goes even way beyond damage and cost, because even the rubble may not remain under Russian control, and no realistic future government is likely to debate whether retaining Melitopol is worth sacrificing global trade, international travel, education, and the future of the entire generation. The baseline is not cinematic victory, but continuation until Putin leaves office, followed by an effort to end the conflict, negotiate sanctions relief, and present the decision as correction of one leader's catastrophic mistake. A black swan event could also theoretically intervene through Trump, Orbán, collapse of Western support, crisis inside Ukraine, aliens, or another event resembling supernatural intervention. But planning national strategy around miracles is not strategy, not at all. And the search for miracles reveals just how little confidence remains in the military path. And now here is the part that makes this scenario especially believable. Most people do not organize their lives around distant territorial claims, because they organize them around salaries, travel plans, children education, the hope that tomorrow will just be simply more predictable than today. Pretty individualistic desires, as you can see. So when the future government offers them a choice between preserving damaged territory through permanent confrontation or restoring a more normal life, the emotional power of television slogans may disappear with surprising speed. Immediately, I would say. The people who spent years arguing that every settlement was sacred will remain loud, of course, like Solovyov. You cannot imagine him apologizing. But they may also discover that they are politically isolated, because the population never developed the same attachment and may view withdrawal not as a surrender, but as the price of ending an abnormal period. That distinction matters a lot, since governments do not need everyone to approve a peace agreement. They only need enough people to prefer it over continued uncertainty. And after years of sanctions, restrictions and anxiety, that threshold may be way easier to reach than the pro-war movement wants to admit. In other words, the future battle may not be over a city on the map, but over who gets to define normality. And a successor promising normality could possess the strongest political weapon of them all. A future narrative may claim Russia never intended to even occupy Kyiv, never expected to hold Kherson, never planned a long war, and never considered these territories permanent, even though today's speeches say completely the opposite. And once television, schools, officials, and institutions repeat the new version, many people will accept it, because acceptance is easier than confronting the scale of what happened. Kherson was, once again, therefore a rehearsal, showing that a piece of land could be declared forever Russian and then abandoned without revolt, without literally anything. They just leave and that's it. Even Slavio doesn't talk about Kherson anymore. But an even darker precedent shows how quickly the state can erase not only territory from its ambitions, but the people sent to capture it. And that precedent began all the way at the very beginning, at Hostomel airport. The first 24 hours of the invasion. That's how early we should go now. Now here's where the story becomes uncomfortable for the Kremlin, because the campaign increasingly resembles a larger version of the Hostomel airport landing and the Russian guard convoy moving towards Kyiv. Operations pretty much presented as the beginning of a decisive, swift victory, but later treated as though their original purpose even never existed. Russian troops fought for Hostomel airport while Russian guard units moved towards Kyiv, yet the official narrative increasingly suggests Russia never even intended now to capture Kyiv. What happened to capturing Kyiv in 3 days, right? Leaving the, obvious question of why those forces were even sent there in the first place. What were they expected to accomplish, and why so many people paid the ultimate price for a mission the state now avoids even discussing. This is exactly where things take a fascinating turn, because rewriting has already started, meaning soldiers involved in Hostomel have effectively been told that an operation many considered central was never even part of the true original plan, while the convoy towards Kyiv has become an inconvenient memory instead of a celebrated chapter. The very same method could apply to Pokrovsk, Chasiv Yar, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Mariupol, Melitopol, and every single other place dominating military coverage. Because once the political objectives change, officials can say those battles belong to Putin's strategy, that the new Russia has chosen another path, and that defending every past decision would only deepen the national disaster. A year after withdrawal, Pokrovsk may be barely remembered, just as many Russians rarely discuss Hostomel right now, simply despite the scale of the original ambition, while the state reduces the entire period to a vague phrase about difficult events under the previous difficult leadership. And before guys finish, please consider that the people currently sent to the battle are not really purchasing permanent territory with their service, but buying simply time for Putin's political system, extending the period before a successor can change course, restore relations, and declare Russia no longer obligated to continue the personal project of a leader who has left power. That is the pro-war community's despair, because its members sense that they may spend years demanding total commitment, celebrating every kilometer, attacking critics, and insisting withdrawal is simply impossible, only to watch a future government reverse everything with one single signature, and receive then thunderous approval and applauses from a population exhausted by isolation. A new leadership could and most likely will and should blame one man and present renewed trade, travel, investment and diplomatic normalization as a return to Russia's natural path, while battles that once consumed every news cycle disappear from television. This would not, unfortunately, instantly force Russia remove sanctions, repair relations with Ukraine or resolve Crimea, but it could make territories captured at least after February 24, 2022 lose their supposed permanence the moment Kremlin's priorities change, creating the final paradox of a war presented as a struggle for history, but remembered as an enormous political delay. The darkest possibility for Putin is not simply that Russia fails to achieve total victory, but that most Russians feel relieved when the campaign ends, applaud withdrawal, welcome the reopening of their country, and stop caring about battles that dominated 4, 5, or perhaps unfortunately even more years of their lives. That would mean that the war produced no lasting territorial prize, no economic gain, no stable settlement, and no legacy the next leadership wished to defend, while millions of families continued carrying the consequences of a project official Russia might later describe as just one man's temporary madness. Every new offensive and settlement may not bring permanent victory, but increase the cost of the agreement that follows Putin. When a future government decides that the country's connection to the world is way more important and way more valuable than the ruins it was told to hold forever. And just like that, historically important Mariupol, Melitopol, Avdiivka, Chasiv Yar, and of course Bakhmut will be returned to Ukraine without a single shot fired in the process. Guys, if today's breakdown helped you understand why Russia's military map and political future may move in completely different directions, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video, because Russia is not Putin, and Putin is not Russia. Don't forget about our Patreon, the link is down below. Thanks so much for watching, see you.